It's because America's police have been looking more and more like troops.
The whole fiat money system creates that income and wealth inequality. I don't know why they have to do studies on it. They've known about this. It's ridiculous, but we're going to study this.
Every adult in the United States, $1,000 a month, no questions asked.
That's right.
I think that's like $3.2 trillion a year. How would you do that?
Hi and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special interview today by very popular demand with Lynette Zang, who is the Chief Market Analyst at ITM Trading. She's been there since 2002, and she's been in this industry, vast knowledge since 1964. So welcome, Lynette, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And actually, I put it into the private group that we have that who would you like to interview? And by overwhelming demand, your name came up. Very popular. A lot of people wanting me to actually interview you. So it's great to have you here. Also on YouTube, I asked last week's video, who would you like me to interview? Your name came up 5 or 6 times, which is absolutely fantastic.
Well, I'm very flattered and very honored. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So we, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to talk about 2 very big topics today. This is going to be part 1, and part 1 is going to be UBI, Universal Basic Income. So I'm very excited to talk about this. As you know, I've been doing a study into this for a long time. I've read most of the studies. Lynette is an expert on topics like this as well, UBI, CBDC, central bank digital currencies, which will be released in tomorrow's video at the same time. So we're going to get into UBI first and foremost with Lynette here. Lynette, why don't you just give us an introduction to what UBI is?
Well, UBI is Universal Basic Income. So it's a way for the central banks and the government to get money into hands of the masses, although universal means everybody, so that they can spend it because we are a consumer-driven economy.
Yeah, fantastic. Let's talk about that then. So what do you see firstly as some of the warnings, like the red flags around UBI, and then if you want to say any benefits or good points that you see? So what would you say are some of the negative points of UBI first and foremost?
Well, I would say that the biggest key negative is that I believe that's what will send us into the hyperinflationary event, because there will be a lot of money chasing a finite amount of goods. So that's the biggest negative that I really see. Additionally, what it does, and so this leads into that as well, the more new money that's being printed or created, the less value all that money that's already out there has. And that's what we work for. And we try and, well, we do use it as our tool of barter. So if you get it today and you spend it today, all right, it's got the same value. But if you're attempting to save for the future, then, it's losing value. And since money is really basically a tool to value your labor, over time, you're getting paid less and less for the labor that you created. And that's really the point of gold, and one of the reasons why gold has always been good money. Because no matter when you use it, it has the same level of purchasing power value. So you're always fairly paid for your labor.
Yeah, great point there. I also talk about not necessarily gold a lot, but I talk a lot about silver. In fact, as many of my viewers know, last year, it was around February, March time, I believe, I started talking about silver. And I said for people to buy silver right now because we had a 115-to-1 gold to silver ratio. And I think a lot of people just probably didn't believe me that they should buy it right there and then. So I pretty much went all in terms of the spare cash I had at the time that I had saved into silver, because I knew with all this printing, as you said, we were going to see a lot of problems. We were going to see the devaluation of currency. So I went very heavy into into silver at the time, and the silver I had doubled in value over that very short time period. So do you see, I guess, gold or silver as, well, do you see it as a store of money? Do you see it as an investment? How do you see it?
Well, it's always interesting because I do get a lot of questions about the gold and silver ratio and all of that. But for me, gold is the primary currency metal, and it's what they reset and revalue the currency against. Silver is the secondary currency metal. So personally, I own both. But for me, it's all about functionality. What am I trying to accomplish? And so when you ask me, well, how do you see it? First of all, it is good money. And in a world where global central banks tell you we need more inflation, what they're really telling you is that the currency is overvalued and they're taking it down. And that also means that any assets or instruments that you can only convert into that fiat money, like stocks or bonds or any of those Wall Street products, it doesn't matter how high they go in nominal terms, in value terms, they're following that dollar. So, really by a lion's share, most of my personal portfolio and wealth is in gold versus silver, because for me, silver is about barterability, day-to-day living, making sure that I can put that tank of gas in if I need it or something like that. Whereas gold is more about wealth preservation as well as opportunity positioning. And what that really means is that I want to make sure that what I've accumulated as far as wealth preservation goes, I want to make sure that what I've accumulated I can keep. And as far as opportunity positioning, and this piece is true for both gold and silver, what I always want to have are most of my wealth in an undervalued asset that's in a long-term positive trend, and both gold and silver are there. Secondly, I want to know what the true value of those assets are so that I know whether it's undervalued, fairly valued, or overvalued. Therefore, do I want to buy it? Do I want to hold it? Do I want to liquidate it? And there are some nuances to it, but both gold and silver are severely undervalued to their most important function, which is as monetary metals, not Wall Street's toys, because it's easy to manipulate contracts. It's cheap. It takes nothing to do it. It's a push of a button. But to pull real gold and silver out of the ground takes energy and effort and time, etc. So no doubt in my mind, but on a super low level, like if you'd say, well, be really conservative about what is the value of gold and silver. Honestly, gold is minimum, if it were at its true value right now, easily somewhere north of $12,000, and silver somewhere north of $600. But when it gets there, would I convert it into those dollars? Only if I needed to pay off a mortgage or buy an income producing asset that I can only buy with the fiat money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I keep saying this to people as well, because so many people say, Neil, when do I convert my silver into fiat, into dollars or pounds or euros? And I say, well, what are you going to do with the money when you convert it? And of course they say, well, keep it in my bank account. Well, no, you've completely missed the point of it. The whole point is to convert it back. But I want to get back onto UBI because, like you, I can get off track very easily, I'm sure, with this. So I want to come back onto the UBI. And I wanted to ask you, really, how do you see the UBI coming about? And then I'll give you some of my thoughts around it. And let's see where we sort of meet in the middle. How do you see it coming about? Because, we've got all these studies now, and I'll just talk about a couple. There was one in San Francisco, Hudson, New York, just in the United States. and very different findings from both of them. We have Alaska, which has been going on a long time. Kenya, Iran, some other Middle Eastern countries have had it. Like, how do you see it coming about in the United States? And would it really be universal throughout the United States? How do you see it coming about?
Well, I think they've already started shifting over that using the cover of the pandemic to do so. And particularly, I think that on a universal basis, they are testing it through the Child Care Act, the new laws that they just put in place, where you can even get paid. They'll send it to you monthly for your child care credits. Additionally, is it universal? Well, I happen to know people that are, earning in terms of dollars right now, somewhere around 150,000 or more. And they just got their checks, that stimulus check for $2,800. And so what are they going to do? Well, they're going to go spend it. So I think in this country and as a whole, I know that there's been studies and there are ongoing studies in different places, but I think in the US, we have definitely already begun to introduce it. We're just not calling it that yet, but a rose by any other name is still a rose.
Yeah.
It's not completely universal. There are people that are above a certain threshold that are not getting those stimulus checks, and frankly, nor should they. But I think the U.S. experiment has definitely already begun, and I think we're going to shift more and more to that because they're not going to be able to take it away, just like they haven't been able to take QE away.
Yeah, you're right.
Universal to the corporations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the QE as well. It's a good point actually you raised there because of course 2008 they did the QE. They said, the Fed, a lot of people still don't know this, Lynette, but the Fed were buying up all the mortgages, the MBS mortgage-backed securities, and they said they would sell them again later on. They never did. And I actually have a theory around this. I haven't looked into it fully yet, but one of the theories I have with why the housing market didn't correct as deep as it did in other serious recessions and depressions, and then it hovered around 40%, 50% in some areas, is because the Fed didn't release those mortgages. They kept them on their balance. They didn't actually release them back into the marketplace. And I wonder if that's perhaps why the housing market didn't crash as bad as it could have. And of course, what are we seeing this time? They now own 34, 35% of all the mortgages in the United States now. The Federal Reserve, a private institution with shareholders owning all the mortgages. It's pretty concerning. And coming on to your point then about they can't really pull it away. They've done all these surveys now with a lot of people in the US, and a lot of people, and I've actually gone out and speaking to people, which is very difficult here in California. People do not want to stop and talk to you. They've got their triple masks, and if you get too close, they freak out. And I've been asking a lot of people about the stimulus, and it's bizarre to me the amount of people that are getting their unemployment. Some of them saying they're getting $2,000, and they're getting their stimulus checks. They're getting all this. They're getting a lot of money, and you see all these we are hiring signs everywhere. The fast food restaurants, we are hiring. They can't recruit fast enough because of what's going on. They can't really pull it away. Prices are going up. I bought, a fast food meal last week, and I was amazed.
Ew, that's so bad for you.
I exercise every day. I can get away with it. That's what we used to.
Not the calories, it's the nutrition.
Yeah, that's right. You have a farm, I know. So you
do. I'm all about nutrition as well. Health for your money and health for your body.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen then with trying to pull this away from people? Do you think they're going to have to give them a UBI? Look at the civil unrest already.
That's exactly right. What did we see before the pandemic? We saw on a global level that a lot more rioting was going on. That the whole fiat money system creates that income and wealth inequality. I don't know why they have to do studies on it. They've known about this. It's ridiculous, but we're going to study this. So yeah, they cannot pull the punch bowl away once they begin. And they absolutely have begun. And 2008 was when the system really died, and they just put it on life support. There was no way that they could have gotten away with doing a similar thing to the last time. This time it had to be to the people. And I would like to make one more point on those mortgage-backed securities before we leave that point, because this is something else people don't realize. But taxpayers are actually responsible for central bank balance sheets. So you've got all these politicians and central bankers that are spending taxpayer money. Taxes have to go up to accommodate all of this. And when you're looking at UBI, no, because you've got all of the technology, all of the new automation, so the lower wage earners, I mean, they have to give them money to spend. They have to. They cannot continue the moratoriums. The CDC just extended the rent moratorium until June. I mean, they've been extending, but it's not like any of this only impacts one little area, because everything is so incestuously interconnected. It's more like a domino effect. So if they say, well, okay, you don't have to pay your mortgage. However, investors that have bought mortgage-backed securities in their portfolios for income, so if it's done through a government agency, then the taxpayer is subsidizing that mortgage moratorium. What happens? Can that go away? I mean, at some point, the moratoriums have to go away. But who's going to be left standing when that happens? So, yeah, they have to give universal basic income. They're changing the rules for all of the, Social Security, this quote unquote safety nets. They're changing the rules of all of the safety nets. And the old safety nets didn't really work very well anyway. Social Security, Medicare, I mean, they're underfunded. They don't have money. They're running deficits. So
what isn't underfunded? I think everything is in that same position.
Wall Street's not underfunded.
Yeah. But, the pensions, this is one of the biggest questions I'm getting a lot as well. People are saying, Neil, is my pension secure and safe? And it's very hard because I don't want to, scare people and worry people. But
I know
the studies that I've done, I don't really want to give that news to people a lot of the time, because I can't see where this money's coming from. And a lot of people, especially government workers who do mentoring and things with me, it's difficult because they say, well, I've put all my money and I'm topping it up and for 30, 40 years into this government pension scheme. And now they're saying they've added these new clauses, so I can't release it. I lose a 30% penalty and then I get taxed at my tax rate. And I'm like, yeah, there's obviously, you've got to read between the lines there. Why would they be doing that? They don't want to release that cash.
they can't, right?
Because it's not there. And it's really scary to tell people, or as I do, I often don't go into all of the detail because I don't want to scare people. But I think you're right about what you said about the automation, the robotics. I mean, what is it, the statistic in the US? 7.5 million truck driving jobs will be lost in the next 5 or 6 years.
If you're a truck driver right now and you haven't started thinking of getting some extra training, education or so, then you're in a difficult position.
I think the trucking company, I think they're Swedish, Scania, someone like that, they've already developed self-driving trucks 3-4 years ago, and they just haven't been fully implemented yet. But as this robotics are coming in, and the other thing that's challenging, I was mentoring a guy about 2 months ago, and he said he's responsible. He's a very senior AI technician. He programs all of these robotics and computers to take people's jobs. He gets paid $400,000 a year for this. And he says, I feel like it's hard to live with myself knowing that every day I'm responsible for hundreds of jobs being lost. And he said, but what am I going to do? Am I going to turn down $400,000 a year? No, that gives my and this is the thing, Lynette. It's all about people. There's tipping points in everything, right? You understand this.
Yes,
There's
absolutely.
tipping points. And I don't know. I think it's going to be a difficult one going forward.
Oh, it's going to be a very difficult one going forward. And I have to tell you, part of the reason why I personally am like so grateful for what I do for a living is because I can look in the mirror every day, and my goal is to have a positive impact on as many people as possible. It's what I've been working for, frankly, my entire life. For any amount of fiat money, I could not do what that man did. I could not do, I'll get comments like, oh, you should run the Federal Reserve. No, 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 no. I could not do those jobs because you really do have to be, and I'm not being so negative about it. I'm being more factual about it. When they're looking for people to do the kind of work that has a negative impact, you kind of need to be a sociopath, because you can't really care about how what you're doing impacts a lot of people negatively. You can't care about that. So I feel sorry for him, because if he does care, he's got to have nightmares, and he's not going to have a great life. Because I don't know this person, but I know that I personally could not do that and live with myself and look at myself in the mirror the next day. But it is life. I mean, I was a new stockbroker in the 80s, and that was when globalization was all the rage and all the talk. And it was also when they were having us work on pulling assets in-house, which means at your brokerage account, you just get this statement instead of holding your bonds and clipping coupons and things like that. That enables the banks to use your equity and Wall Street to use your equity for their benefit by hypothecating it or using it as collateral. I was there when they were starting all of these things. And I have to say, I was in my 30s at that time. I didn't fully understand. I mean, I remember saying, yeah, I don't think this is a good thing, but they would pay you for assets in-house. If you could get your client to just leave their assets at the brokerage, I was with Shearson, if you could get them to leave it there, then I got paid every month just on assets in-house. And clearly, if they're paying me, they're making a lot more money from doing it.
Yeah.
Right? Now it's gotten to the point where, all bonds are purely in book entry, so nobody can take possession of a bond anymore. That's all held legally, owned by DTC or DTCC. They're working on creating that same thing with stocks. And you also mentioned the pensions. I mean, I was there when they first came out with IRAs. And we've been witnessing over these years the fall of the pensions where the corporations are responsible for the retirement, and the rise of the IRAs, the self-directed IRAs, and the 401ks that puts the responsibility on the naive public that really does not understand Wall Street, what they're doing, and the layers of fees that are hidden from view. And it just makes everybody vulnerable. So for those people that have pensions and you can't pull money out, if you can, I mean, everybody's got to do what they're comfortable. I can't tell you what to do. But personally, I used to have a SEP IRA. Notice I said used to. I liquidated everything and I paid my taxes. At that time, I paid my penalties. I didn't care. I still have a retirement plan, but frankly, it's all in gold and silver because I hold it, I control it, it runs no counterparty risk, and I know the spot market garbage that goes on. I've been in that world forever.
Yeah, good points. I'm sure people will, you probably answered a couple of questions there that people have had on their minds for a while. And let me get back to the UBI a little bit because I've got a question here. So I don't know if you, how closely you followed the US presidential, debates and everything this year, but I did because I wanted to, it was like a drama series this year, wasn't it? But one of the candidates running was Andrew Yang, and he was running for the Democrats. And one of his policies, which was very popular, was the UBI. And he was probably the first person that I've actually seen come out with a plan as to how it would be funded.
Every adult in the United States, $1,000 a month, no questions asked.
That's right.
I think that's like $3.2 trillion a year. How would you do that?
Sorry?
How would you do that?
Because I've seen dozens and dozens, maybe 30, 40 people, politicians, academics, economists, all talk about the UBI. And this is recently, I'm not talking about historical.
Right.
But yet you're waiting for the end when they're going to say how it's going to be funded. And then they say, well, that's it. Thank you very much, ladies and gents. And you're like, okay, come on. Is anyone going to explain? It's easy to say, give everyone free money. Anyone can say that. I could say right now, I'm going to give everyone $1 million a year. But how is it going to be funded? Money isn't just magic. People think it's just magic and it just comes out of nowhere. People don't even realize that the $1,500, stimulus and things like that is costing them probably $20,000. They have no idea that they're now on the hook for about $20,000 per $1,500. People just want free money. But actually, Andrew Yang said the way he was going to do it, and I think he's a little bit naive in this thought process.
A value-added tax at even half the European level, it would generate over $800 billion in new revenue.
Mr. If I get you understand a little bit better, so you're saying $1,000 a month for everyone over 18, but a value-added tax, so you can spend that $1,000 on value-added tax?
Where is this money going to come from? Everyone's talking about this UBI. Have you got any theories as to where exactly they're going to get it? Because I can't see where it's going to come from for this sheer amount.
Well, what they're really talking is modern money theory, where debts don't matter. I mean, after all, in the U.S., with the world's reserve currency, we create dollars, and we can go boop like that and create them out of thin air. And so debt really doesn't matter. Deficits don't really matter. They'll just create it. And while you're right, everybody wants free money, the reality is if something seems to be free, it probably costs a whole lot more than what you realize. So, I think with the UBI, I mean, it's really interesting because I know we're going to talk about this topic, for tomorrow's discussion on the CBDCs. But, that's the thing. That's why we have to reset into a new system and a new currency. Because right now, everything is based upon debt. And it's not just that this debt is not sustainable. It hasn't been sustainable in forever. It is that it is not even marginally payable. And the only place to get any of this money is through taxation. Mm-hmm. And you always have to be careful because, like right now, there's a lot of talk about taxing the wealthy and then putting a wealth tax on your holdings. Greece has done that, right? We see the circumstance that Greece is in, but it may start in one place, but that's never, ever, ever where it ends. Yeah. And again, you got to remember, the more money they create out of nothing or from debt, the less value everything out there has. And when confidence in the system, it goes back to why they're even doing it, because confidence in the central banks and the governments has been declining for many years, and there's really not a whole lot left. So they're trying to feed the masses with this UBI, with free money, so that they can keep them under control. Because when people are hungry and hopeless, let's face it, they make choices they would not otherwise make.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of studies into that as well, that wealth disparity causes more social unrest, violence, crime. But actually, one thing as we were talking is that my mind finally put together something that I've been trying to figure out for a while. So a lot of my thoughts are original. You know, I don't watch everyone's YouTube channels and learn from them and things like that. A lot of it is original thought. And I think I may have just solved, as you were talking, one of the conundrums I've been dealing with. And I think a UBI in America probably would work under the debt system, only because they are the reserve currency. So by America having the reserve currency and creating more debt to pay for the UBI is at the expense of other countries possibly holding the dollar-denominated debts. So I'm wondering if that is what it is. I'm going to look into this a little bit later on.
If a government creates its own currency, then the debts don't matter, because they can just create money out of thin air to pay those debts. But going along with what you were talking about, and since we are shifting the monetary system, the social fabric, as well as the financial system, you know, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which of course is composed by all of the central bankers and all the treasury secretaries, right? They created the SDR, that's the IMF's currency, special drawing rights. It's just a name. It doesn't really mean anything. But it's a basket of currencies, and that was created back in 1969 to take over as the world reserve currency from the U.S. So even though the U.S. was able to create the petrodollar and retain that system, the IMF never got rid of what they created back in 69. They tested all the mechanisms in 2009, and what they put in place to deal with what you were just talking about is the substitution fund, where anybody that's holding dollar or dollar denominated instruments or assets like bonds or anything else, dollars, whatever, they can make a deposit into this substitution fund. And then the IMF would convert them into SDR denominated instruments. And then in theory anyway, they could regulate the speed at which the dollars flowed back to the US, which could then hide that transition. And at the same time, what it would do is it would create the SDR as the world reserve currency. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't make a certain level of sense, because the SDR is a basket of currencies. So it's more universal, and they can increase that basket to include every currency on the planet if they want to.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's kind of similar to what they're, to the, well, it's really going along with not so much the cryptocurrencies, but what they have in mind. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of overstepping, but they're all kind of together, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. You know, the interesting you're mentioning the SDRs, because it seemed as though, originally the SDRs, to me at least, looked like a failed experiment back in the day. But now what I'm seeing is the IMF, which I am not a fan of at all, Lynette, just to let you know.
Me neither.
How can employees have diplomatic immunity, have no, diplomatic passports, can go wherever they want, can commit crimes. I won't go into that story. Person that committed that serious crime, nothing against them. I don't understand how that's even possible
And they
unless
don't have to pay taxes either.
no,
Woohoo! It's a good job.
it's absolutely insane. But yeah, it looks like the SDRs are coming back with a vengeance. They seem to be creating these new baskets by the hundreds of billions. So I need to do more research on it, but I've got some theories on where this is going to go. But I just wanted to finish off on a couple of points with UBI then, a couple of things. So I've read about, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 studies on this. And I think my final summary with it really, there's two things that they wanted to do. One is to reduce unemployment by with the UBI, Universal Basic Income, reduce unemployment. And the second is to reduce wealth disparity, because obviously they know about crime and violence and things like that. Maybe that's why they are militarizing the police force right now.
But can you tell which ones are the police? If it's hard to tell, it's these guys, by the way. It's because America's police have been looking more and more like troops.
It wouldn't surprise me if they know. I mean, obviously, the governments are not stupid. They know what's coming. They know where all this is leading. So that would make sense to implement a UBI to reduce this violence and the crime.
Permanent. It's not a permanent solution, because that money will buy less and less. And when people feel comfortable and confident that they're going to get that every month, they'll go out and spend it, chase those goods, and then the prices will start to rise even faster than what we've seen in this past year.
Yeah.
So it won't last.
No, because of course, what happens as well is people, when they get more money, they spend more money. So
Right.
they'll just raise their living standards to the new level of money that they've got. They're not going to stick at where they were. They're going to raise that up. So that's where I see it going. But actually, if you look at the studies, I believe Hudson, New York was $500 per month, and the San Francisco study was $1,000 per month, right? There's obviously a tipping point between the 500 and the 1,000. And I think once you get to the $1,000 level, what actually happens is certain people say, it's not worth me working. Mm-hmm. It's really not worth me working to get that extra 1,000. But again, coming back to what we said about the reserve currency and things like that, the reason that realization came into mind was because I thought about the countries where this worked, and it was oil countries, because they're net exporters of oil. So they're exporting this oil. I remember when I was in the army and I worked in different Middle Eastern countries, and I would, make lots of friends with these people and say, how have you got so much money? What do you do for work? And they say, oh, the government gives us money every month because we have oil money. They give, I think it was the ladies apartments or condos or whatever. It was very, very interesting how all of this is coming about. But I do agree with you that I think this is going to work temporarily. And as I've said, and I haven't changed my opinion on this, I do think we're in for worse times ahead. I think I did a 3-part, yeah, for sure. I did a 3-part series on the Great Depression. I don't know if you ever saw it, but it's worth you watching, seeing the correlations between today.
So many.
Yeah.
Well, but that was the beginning of this experiment, and this is the end of the experiment. So it would make sense. And I would also like to point out, even in those oil exporting countries where they did so much in subsidizing, you still had the Arab Spring. You still had the uprisings. And look at Venezuela. They're sitting on the largest oil reserves in the world. And
yeah.
So yeah, you can subsidize, but especially with the destruction of the middle class. I mean, look at how many middle class, this mom and pop destruction movement has been going on really since they allowed Amazon, and that's another story. That another day. But, the destruction of the middle class and mom and pop shops has been happening for really since probably about 99, 2000. And the problem with that is that they employ about 50% of the people. So there is a lot more, you're seeing more businesses open up, but not as many as shut down. So if these people are chronically, there's like 10 million people still chronically unemployed, they have to give them money every month to spend. They would be, in my opinion, they would be much better off re-educating them, because those low-paying jobs are not coming, once the automation takes complete hold, those jobs are not coming back, and they need to be retrained in the direction that we're going in. But God, there's so much, because then you've got to talk about the education system.
Yeah, I know, Lynette, I completely agree with you on this. I've been saying the same thing. Yeah, one of the things with UBI is I've said from the beginning, yes, but how are you going to fund it? Number one. But two, get people re-educated. If you get people who are low income and you just give them the money, not all of them, a lot of them will still want to better themselves and go and re-educate and things like that. But a lot will just say, what's the point? It's hard to get a job anyway. And it's a very difficult situation that we're in. And it's funny you mentioned Venezuela. One of my clients in Venezuela, and I was asking him about the situation and the food shortages, and he said, well, put it this way. If you went to Venezuela a couple of years ago, you'd see street dogs everywhere. Now you don't see any. That is not a good situation for those people, and they're sat on all that oil, and it's very, very sad. I feel for the people. I really do.
Oh, it's horrible, but that's why I have my mantra. That's why, I was not a gardener. I was not a farmer. That was not my thing. I was actually getting ready to retire when 2008 hit.
Wow.
So, and then that changed everything. And now I don't see retirement, at least until the end of this transition.
Yeah.
But food becomes the single biggest issue for people as we go through these transitions.
Yeah.
And if we think about what happened, a year ago with the grocery store shelves going bare, and we saw a little bit of that, I think it was in June as well, then we know the supply chain is broken. It is broken, and it has not been repaired. So I have an urban farm here where originally I was just trying to feed my family, but I don't know how to do things in a small way. So, so I feed lots of people now, but the goal became to feed as many people as possible. And I put a lot of food on the outskirts, because when people are hungry and hopeless and they can't feed their children, they make choices they would not otherwise make. So I think everybody needs to be prepared to be as self-sufficient and independent as possible. That's why community is so important. What you and I are doing here, this is all part of the community. But, make sure that you have, whatever your circumstances, there's always a way to make sure that you have some food. Rice and beans make a complete protein. If you throw a can of tomatoes in there, it can be, really tasty. Don't eat fast food, because your best defense against, please, your best defense against everything is a very strong immune system. And, if you really look at the evolution of food in this country, it really was designed to dumb us down.
I agree.
Why would you agree with that? I know why you would agree with that one, but why would you say that's okay and go out and eat that? We vote with our pocketbooks.
Yeah.
McDonald's would not exist if they were depending on me. None of those fast food places would exist if they were depending on me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So sorry.
No. I'm just thinking, because we've got so much to cover on the central bank digital currency, I think let's end today's video there, and let's move on to the central bank digital currency. So thank you everyone for watching part one of this fantastic discussion with Lynette Zang from ITM Trading. I'm going to link Lynette's details below in the description so that you can find out more about Lynette. She also has a YouTube channel, very, very useful. She talks about a lot of things, currency reset and all sorts of other things. But we're going to go over to part two now, and we'll see you all tomorrow for part two.